There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello, and welcome to a Radulich and Broadcasting Network podcast triple feature. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, I'm so excited. I have a bona fide professional critic. See, I'm done with all of you regular podcasters, and you're yelling about Marvel and Star Wars movies.
All of you plebes, the hoi polloi.
I have ascended and I have grabbed hold of a true professional to sit here and discuss with me three art house weirdo films. Ladies and gentlemen, from the critically acclaimed podcast, which I talk about incessantly on these shows, Witney Seibold. How do you do, sir?
Hello, it's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to talk about these films. Aren't that well? Lamb might be a little weird, but the other films aren't super weird. I've seen so much weirder. I mean, come on.
I was going to say Pig is probably the least weird of the bunch.
Mm.
You know, so I when I saw the trailer for Pig over the summer, so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about Wolf, Lamb, and Pig because that's my sense of humor, and I'm like, I got to do these three barnyard art house films together.
We gotta wait. Hold on. We have to come up with like a subgenre term for like barnyard art house movies, like barn exploitation of some kind, or like hoofcore. You can call it hoofcore.
I'm down with hoofcore.
Yeah, although wolves don't have hooves, but it'll fit.
Later, when I bump this on Twitter, I'm going with hoofcore. I'm gonna get that trending. That's perfect. I saw the trailer for Pig over the summer. I actually saw it with a friend of mine while we were on vacation, and I pitched. He's, at the time, I think like Snake Eyes was and M. Night Shyamalan's Old were out, and I had planned to do those when I got back. So I'm like, so we can't go see those. I'm seeing those with other people. Like, let's go see Pig. I hear it's John Wick, but instead of a dog, it's a pig. And it's not, and it wasn't that at all, but we ended up loving it. And I have to tell you, Whitney, I am, as much as I got into podcasting and talking about and trying to examine the summer blockbusters and, what are these films doing? How are they affecting the film industry? Is it just Jingling Keys, the movie, or is it, there's something to be had here? Over time, I've really gotten back to my roots of getting into like independent film, art house film, stuff like that, especially the stuff of the 90s. Earlier in the summer, we did a movie called Spun and stuff like that. And not everyone's always with me on those. But I want to hear a little bit about you. For those of you who have never heard Critically Acclaimed before, tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, God, what is my background? Well, I'm a Leo. I have been podcasting with my podcasting partner, William Bibiani, since 2011. He and I were neighbors. It turns out we had similar interests, and we ended up just sort of falling into the biz together. He had a job that required a podcasting partner, and we've been sort of doing it in one form or another ever since. Prior to that, we had both been writing here and there in sort of a very loose freelance fashion. But yeah, we've both always pretty much been deeply interested in film. I majored in film in school, if that's something you need to hear about my background. I don't know. Yeah, we've been podcasting for a really long time. We ended up launching our own network a couple of years back, and now we've been doing that. And it's been very freeing running our own network because we get to talk about whatever films we want. There's no mandate. We don't necessarily have to see the big commercial releases. We do, but we can push them off to the side if they don't interest us that much. And as such, yeah, we've been able to get into the weirdo stuff we're more interested in. Last year, the pandemic year, has been weirdly exhilarating in that when all of the big blockbusters were kind of out of the picture, theaters were closed and a lot of the studios were delaying their bigger releases, that kind of opened the door for us to have deeper conversations about little things that other people wouldn't have noticed otherwise. So the film I like to go to was The Vast of Night, which was this really wonderful tiny budget independent movie about an alien invasion, but it was mostly through like monologues and conversations and really foreboding soundscapes. It was the year that we can kind of look to streaming and see a lot of what the more interesting things were coming out of that, those venues that studios were putting their money into. So we got to discover things like the Small Axe cycle, which was the best films of the year, and going back to the blockbusters was a little bit disenchanting. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I do like, if it's a good, exciting action picture, I'm going to say so. But the conversations that are more interesting to a freak like me is, really things that are really unusual, things that are trying to push the boundaries a little bit in some way or another, whether it's really strange and off-putting, whether it's really horrifying, or if it's just really tapping into a deeper facet of the human experience that you might not run into in a big mainstream blockbuster, which I don't want to say they all fulfill the same job, but they are there to entertain a really broad audience. And so there tends to be less exploration of maybe more complex human themes, or they're not there to slow you down. They're not there to calm you. They're not there to provoke. They're there to kind of comfort, give you something that you are kind of familiar with already. And those, for me, those are less interesting conversations. I tend to aim my eye toward things that might challenge me or even hurt me a little bit. That's the kind of freak I am.
When I was in college, I wasn't a film major, but I took a bunch of film classes, directing classes, stage classes, that sort of thing. And my friend and I used to haunt the Tower Records, as a reference from back in the day. And we would go, when DVDs were like a new and wonderful thing, and a lot of stuff, like a lot of the Roger Corman B movies, a lot of the blaxploitation films were like soul cinema. We used to haunt the Tower Records and go through the DVD bins looking for all these old movies. I really fell in love with like the decade of the 70s decade of movies, that sort of thing. And like you, I got caught up in the cycle of having to chase the Marvel movies and the Star Wars movies, and not that I don't love them. Many of them I do. They've brought me a lot of joy, but I was starting to miss those days where I would watch things like Irreversible with my friends, and we were like, oh my God, what is this that we're watching? And the movie, oddly enough, that got me back into remembering that I used to love independent cinema and weirdo movies was Zola. Did you see Zola this year?
And unfortunately, I haven't. That's actually one of the ones that passed me by this year, just in sort of the to-do of all the other releases. But yes, I have heard nothing but positive things about Zola.
It's so good, and that is right in my wheelhouse. It's just two strippers on a road trip, and it's hysterical. But so when I saw that, I hadn't gotten to Lamb when it first came out, but I had heard it was this really it was described as a horror movie, and I guess kind of. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in this. I just never had a chance to see it until I came up with the idea for this podcast, and I had heard about Lily-Rose Depp and Wolf. And what that was about. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give that a shot. And like I said, we already talked about Pig. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about Woof, which actually just came out in wide release, which shocked the heck out of me. When Nightmare Alley abandoned its spot on the calendar for December 3rd and moved to, of all things, against Spider-Man on December 17th, it left nothing in place for December 3rd. And the only wide release left was this movie, Woof, which is this Irish-Polish film about a man who suffers from species dysphoria, and he's committed to an asylum where he gets treatment by a therapist called the Zookeeper, and there's all these other kids in there, and they all think they're these different animals. And I heard your review on Critically Acclaimed, and I wasn't sure if it was the last one you guys did, so I wasn't sure if you just ran out of time or ran out of things to say about this. The whole thing about this, and then I'll pass it over to you to start us off, is gosh, how long was this thing? It was just a little over an hour and a half, and it's basically you just follow the treatment of these patients in this asylum, and over the course of time, the treatments become more harsh, and the treatment by the zookeeper becomes harsher, and to a point where it becomes abusive. The main wolf in this thing, George McKay, who plays Jacob, he starts to regress, and he's exhibiting more of his wolf characteristics, his wolf persona, as it were, and that causes the zookeeper to in turn become more hostile with him, which then causes the patients to revolt, and eventually Lily Depp, who thinks she's a wildcat of some description, helps him escape. And this is what I really want to hear your thoughts on. At the end of the movie, Lily-Rose Depp gets him to the fence, and then they're like, okay, we can escape this place, this horrible place that we've been in that isn't working for any of us. We can leave. And she goes like, I can't. And she says something really brilliant in this. She was just like, we have no money. We have no way to live. We're animals. I'm a girl. This is going to go badly for me. I'm not leaving, but by all means, you get out of here. And he's trying to convince her to go. And finally, he it's poop or get off the pot. So he hops the fence and he makes a run for it. And she stays. And while I thought that was probably the most truthful part of the movie, this idea of like, this is terrible, but I'm never good. This can only get worse for me. So you make a run for it, you muscular man, you. And I thought, and I was thinking about what you said at the end of the review, and I had a kind of a similar reflection. I was like, it's the point of this movie. It's better to be happy and nuts than it is to be sad and angry but sane. And I'm like, what are we saying with this movie, Witney Seibold?
Well, I think the director doesn't really know. I think it purports to be a celebration of outsiderness, kind of finding your bliss, being a blissful, happy kook in a world that doesn't have a place for you. That I think is what the statement with this species dysphoria is. These are young people, and they're all young, and they're all white, and they're all affluent, and they have this species dysphoria. They want to escape whatever they're doing. They clearly need to leave the human world. And the frustrating thing about the movie is the psychology of the characters is never really delved into.
No.
We never get any sort of sense as to why this has happened or what their life is like at home. We see that some of them have like doting wealthy parents who are trying to cure them of whatever this illness is. And also that they're not making any kind of effort to understand them, which makes me think it has this kind of outsider quality to it. Think of a movie like this could have been made by Tim Burton, who makes movies about these sort of like kooky outsiders. And so it's not really a psychological treatise of any kind. And so we're not getting into the minds of the characters in any kind of, I feel, meaningful way. All we're seeing is these people who need to escape. And the frustrating thing about this movie is I sympathize far more with the zookeeper than I do with any of the patients. The zookeeper is trying to, he's not trying to delve into their psychology. He clearly thinks very little of this psychosis.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of reality testing. The girl who thinks she's a parrot is a big example of that.
Yeah, and like the girl thinks she's a parrot, she's wearing feathers and has this beak, and it's kind of an absurd image, but we're also meant to sort of sympathize with her because the zookeeper is yelling at her, and there's a scene in the movie where she's standing in a window, flapping her wings, about to take off like a parrot would, and the zookeeper, Patty Considine, is encouraging her to do that. It's like, jump, fly. Can you fly? Is your body a parrot's body? No, it's not. You're not a parrot. And she ends up kind of chickening out. So he's proven right in that instance. There's another scene where a man who thinks he's a squirrel tries to climb a tree and ends up in this really gruesome shot, snapping off one of his fingernails. And, in that moment, it's like, oh, wait, I don't have claws. And yet, you'd think these would be kind of moments of minor catharsis, either for the patient or for the zookeeper. The patient would either realize that they are human, or they would dig in deeper, say, well, that was a failure, so I need to prove myself in another way.
Right.
And neither of those things are provided. They're not, or it would be, if anything, it's just a catharsis for the zookeeper. He's the one who's sort of proven his point. And the fact that they keep on retreating back into their animal natures, like, is that a failing of some kind? Is that a failing on the part of the patients? Is it a failing on the part of the zookeeper? It just, they're not really following through with the way these people think.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly frustrating. And all I want to do by the end of the movie is do more of those zookeeper tests. Say, he's yelling at the people at the end, just sort of screaming, saying, you're not, and like he's just lost his cool. He just gets so frustrated that he starts screaming at these people. And I can tell the filmmakers wanted that moment to be a moment of revelation, that he's the real animal here.
Right.
He's behaving like a monster.
Right. You're supposed to see him as the villain, and like you, and the whole time I'm going, but he's right. They're dysfunctional. This is not the way to be.
And there's also no indicator that the characters are any happier being animals. They all seem really miserable in this asylum. And it's not because of the asylum. It's just because they have no place in the world. And maybe we're supposed to sympathize with that sense of being lost. But I mean, the film isn't doing the heavy lifting to get me to feel that.
My struggle with this movie, just a half a second on my background. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Okay. Have been for about 20 years now, mostly working with really impoverished people, or in the last decade, correctional healthcare. And I immediately recognize these as coping mechanisms for trauma. Now, I'm able to project that from myself because of my background. I wish the movie had talked about, like, even like, I'm not asking for them to, as you said, do a treatise on mental illness, but it would have been nice to have had at least a line or two, a conversation about, hey, these are people who develop these dysfunctional coping mechanisms for the trauma they've suffered, and talk a little bit about the trauma. The whole thing is sort of a like cognitive behavioral exercise in, okay, we'll act like, walk like a man, be a human being, not a squirrel, not a parrot. I mentioned reality
testing. To walk on two legs, not on four. To walk on four legs breaks the law. What happens when the rules aren't fair?
That's right.
Oh no, where we go. They should have played No Spill Blood by Oingo Boingo over the credits. That would have been great.
I would have had a good laugh, and I needed it at the end of that movie. Just to sort of bring this to a wrap, I liked the movie, as sort of just because we digest so much of like the Marvel, Star Wars, Ghostbusters type stuff out there. I at least like the movie that was trying to, be small and point to a very specific thing and play with it and say, well, what if we had this group of people who thought they were animals? What would this look like? And but like you said, the problem is, the movie is making the sanest guy in the movie seem like the villain. And I'm like, I don't really like your perspective here. The narrative perspective of this movie seems, I don't want to, it seems like it forgives mental illness as some sort of like, I don't know if you remember the Predator movie from a few years ago where they thought autism was a superpower. Yeah. That sort of thing. That Alice one was in Wonderland, sort of psychedelic 70s, 60s, like, craziness and mental illness and drugs are all wonderful and should be celebrated. And it's like, yes, but then how would we eat?
Yeah.
Who makes the stuff and grows the food if we're all nuts and having fun?
Yeah. I remember seeing a film once. It's not a good movie with Sean Penn. It's called I Am Sam, and it's one of the more notorious examples of a major Hollywood player playing a neurodivergent character, and some would say to an offensive degree, but I'm not one to speak. And there is a scene in that movie. The movie is about this neurodivergent man who mentally mentally incapacitated man who is fighting for the right to maintain custody of his daughter.
Mhm.
And the state is arguing, well, no, because he actually has the mentality of a child. He's about as mature as a 5-year-old. He doesn't have the capacity to raise a child who is not neurodivergent. And we're supposed to sympathize with that because he wants to raise his daughter. He loves his daughter. And of course, that's very sad if she would need to be taken away.
Mhm.
But there's a scene where one of the bad guys of the movie, who's arguing to keep the daughter and the father separate, says that he doesn't want Sean Penn to win this case because if he does, he knows he's going to see the daughter again. Something's going to happen where the daughter is going to be taken away again. This isn't going to turn out well. I see, and he even argues, I see this sort of thing all the time. And I feel that way about the end of Wolf. Okay, he's free of this hospital. He's going to run out into the woods. We're going to see him again. He's going to come back. They're going to catch him. He's not going to, go out into the woods and be a wolf. If you really wanted to sort of push the point home, add like a fantasy element where he steps out into the woods and he sheds his human skin in this magical metamorphosis and actually becomes a wolf and runs out into the wild. That would have at least, pointed out in this sort of fantasy way that this is where he really belonged. But we don't get anything like that. We get the sense that he's definitely more comfortable, living in the wild, being in the woods. Right. But he doesn't seem.
Should have quoted Thoreau and said, "I'm going off in the woods to live deliberately."
Yeah, I get no sense that he's prepared to live in the woods. That this is something he's capable of. That he did it for a long time in the past. I just see this guy ready to return when the food runs out or when he can't find dormice to eat or whatever it is he's doing out there.
When he's trespassed off someone's property and taken to jail.
Where
they don't cotton to no wolf behavior.
So this was an immensely frustrating movie because I feel like it didn't come to any sort of points that it wanted to.
No, I've often said when some movies just unravel like they just ran out of footage. They're like, okay, well, we reached the end of the reel. We're done now. Roll credits.
Yeah.
Like, huh? So I think, I think this was an okay first start, but it might have needed another pass through the script writing process. And another thing it might have needed, this is one of my tired ad reads, is Grammarly. Grammarly's AI products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, it's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Okay, let's get to Lamb. So
Lamb. Oh boy, Lamb.
Yeah. It's made its Cannes debut July 13th, 2021, and then it came out in Iceland and then I guess the rest of the world on September 24th of 2021. This is a movie with subtitles, which I don't get to do very often. It was interesting, especially hearing the Icelandic language.
Subtitles when you get any words at all, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. The story is Noomi Rapace, and it's essentially about a couple, which at first pass watching this movie, I didn't quite get some of this. I had to go back and read about what is this about now? It's about a husband and wife who are going through some marriage troubles after the death of their child, and they're running a sheep farm in Iceland, and an entity impregnates one of the sheep, who then gives birth to a hybrid human sheep baby, who they then go ahead.
Well, you're kind of skipping ahead because they withhold that information for you for a long time in this movie.
Right.
Sheep gives birth to a lamb, and we see the lamb's head, but we never see the whole of the lamb's body. And they take it inside and bundle it up, and we never see the lamb's body, but they're treating it kind of like a human baby. And it's not until the mama sheep is like butting its head on the house outside, give me my baby back. We think that they've just taken the lamb inside,
Right.
That's it. And the only there's nothing really creepy about it. They're just sort of living
Caring
with a
for
little lamb.
Yeah.
It's cute.
Like
Cute
you're
little
almost
lammy.
led to believe like maybe the lamb is crippled in some way and they're having to take care of it, other than Noomi Rapace when it's born. And again, you only, as she's pointed out, you only see the head of it. She just has a sort of shocked look on her face, and then almost like in a trance, she picks it up and takes it into the house, and then we're into caring for it as a baby. And as you said, it's wrapped up. You just see the head. It's not revealed until later, much later, as a matter of fact, where the child, as it's growing, leaves the house at some point and is like down by the river, and you see like, oh, it's a lamb's head on a child.
On a human child's body. Like she picks it up.
Mm-hmm.
We see like a human body, and it becomes this new kind of movie at that point.
Yeah.
At first it was like, okay, this is a psychological study. This is people who are clearly projecting the absence of their lost child onto the presence of this animal. And it just sort of like kind of magically struck them to do so in this moment, which I'm fine with. I think that's a good way to sort of look at it. And then when it's revealed to be this sort of fantasy creature, you can tell that it's trying to go for something a little bit more fairy tale like, that there's some sort of fable or aphoristic quality about the movie, that they're trying to explore some sort of complex human morality using this adorable fantasy animal.
Right.
And that's meant to be challenged by the appearance of the husband's brother, who, as we will learn pretty quickly, once had an affair with Noomi Rapace, and he would very happily like to start that affair again. And he sees the lamb, and he sees it as this strange creature. He sees a lamb with a human body, and he doesn't really know how to react to that, but their insistence on him treating it like a human baby is sort of has him eventually sort of coming around. He stops feeding it grass and starts viewing it as a kid, and it becomes this sort of hothouse little emotional marital drama between these three characters, and the lamb doesn't matter to that.
Right.
The lamb isn't part. The fable-like quality, whatever we're trying to explore with the lamb, is sort of pushed aside. The lamb doesn't instigate any of that. The lamb doesn't enhance any of that.
Yeah, and the whole movie is kind of a relationship drama, and the lamb is sort of an antecedent to the whole thing. It's just sort of hanging around, but this is about the husband and the wife and the brother and their relationship with each other.
Yeah, and the climax of the film is we learn the actual nature of what the lamb is, like a little bit more as to where it came from or what it was or why it was living with them, and that it's not a satisfying conclusion for me. It's like, okay, now I know what the lamb is. I still don't know why. I still don't know like what this was supposed to represent or why it was necessary to explore this human drama that these characters were going through, and that was really frustrating. And the most frustrating thing of all was listening to the score of this film, listening to the music and the long contemplative shots and these beautiful vistas and this big valley in Iceland. And it is trying to trick me into thinking that this is a horror movie of some kind, that there's some sort of sense of foreboding, that something really horrible is going to happen because of this lamb, or that the true nature of this lamb is going to reveal the true inky blackness of the human heart. No, it doesn't. Nothing really kind of comes to a head. Nothing really terrifying happens, but it's being directed as if what I'm watching is supposed to be terrifying. And that's really frustrating, because that is a bad stylistic choice. If they had made it a little bit more plinky and a little bit more lighthearted, or even a little bit more folksy about, some sort of bardic tradition, as if we were being told this kind of story, rather than focusing on the long natural shots and the really spooky score, then maybe I would have picked up on something a little bit different. But your insistence on me taking this as a horror film isn't working.
It's a movie that wants you to be contemplative. It wants you to be thinking about what's happening while it's going on. It wants you to listen in closely. There is a lot of whispering and long, soulful glances at the camera or looking askance and all of that. And sort of like artfully done. It's a very pretty movie to watch given the landscapes and whatnot. But when you sort of take a step back and you're like, okay, I can appreciate its sort of indie quality, but what happened in this movie? I've only seen clips of it, but Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson in A Marriage Story. I mean, like, this is a marriage that's going down the tubes as near as I can tell, and they think they're and they're having a fight. I was thinking about this before. I'm like this was like somebody who watched like Ruthless People or something and was like, okay, but what if we removed everything that made that movie fun and just focused on the marriage falling apart? They're like, okay, but who'd watch that? All right, but what if we put a lamb hybrid in there? Like, it's like kind of like with Wolf, where you start to wonder, what is it you're trying to tell us with this movie, and why did you think you needed the lamb in there? Because if you just wanted to talk about how marriages fall apart and how children can affect a marriage, especially the death of a child, there's a movie in there. There's plenty of movies in there. Plenty of movies that have done that. But if you're going to then throw in the mutant lamb, you need to do a little bit more to it than it just being a casual observer to this world around it. Peter comes off as even when the highest point of tension in this movie, short of the ending, is when Peter goes to shoot the lamb, and I really did have like an abject moment of horror, like, oh my god, he's going to shoot this child lamb thing, and what's going to happen, and then the way that it's cut, you don't get a sense of why he changed his mind. He does. You're supposed to extrapolate that he had it. He couldn't do it. He had a moment. His conscience got to him, something along those lines. But nothing ever gets really explored.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand that moments. That's like a Disney movie moments. Like, I gotta shoot Old Yeller. Oh, I can't do it. The dog is too cute. The lamb is cute. It's a lamb. Lamb is like a little cute, and it's also like has a human baby. So it's I understand his difficulty in that moment, but yes, it doesn't really lead to anything being unlocked or changed in him, and that's really frustrating.
Yeah. Also, if you're going to talk about the problem with the movie, and like I said, I had to go back and read the plot synopsis in order to get this level of detail, but I watched it very closely in a very quiet room. I watched it on my phone during my lunch break, and I'm sitting there, and you can tell there's some tension between the couple. You can tell that there's a bit of space between them, but you don't know why, and it's never really talked about. And I wish that if I love the best part of this movie for me is that line between the two brothers when the brother's like, "What the F, man? Like, why is this thing in your house? What are we doing here?" And the other brother says, "It's happiness." And I got it. Like, I understand, the idea of what a child can bring to a marriage that's going through some troubles. I mean, not always. It could also cause more troubles, but there's certainly a level of appreciation I have for, we brought this child into the world and it saved us. Okay, great. I'm with you so far. And I love that line. It's happiness. Leave it alone. Problem is, I wish there had been a little bit more exploration of what made the couple kind of fall to pieces before all this happened. It's like, I'm very fond of saying, film should show, not tell, but to be utterly absent of these things, makes me struggle with the film. Like I said, it's a lot of great performances, but it's also a lot of, it's also a lot of sorrowful glances at the camera for long periods of time. And I'm going, all right, like, give me something else here.
Yeah. Just that anything would have been fine.
All right. I mean, overall, I liked Lamb, and then the ending where with the beastie coming to claim the child, I was like, I was trying to. I had a lot to do to get ready for this. Among other things, I only do 170 podcasts. I'm sure you know. Busy yourself, so I'm kind of watching with one eye and doing stuff on the computer with the other, and then suddenly this, like, we spoil the movies here, this ram monster thing shows up with a gun.
Well, he's a not a centaur, a satyr.
Yeah,
they live with a satyr essentially, and but he's like a ram man with hooves, and it's.
And I had that like visceral, what the hell is this moment? Like, what am I watching here? And then the poor man dies, and his wife shows up, and she's just catatonic with regret and sadness, and the movie ends, and I'm like, all right.
and that's what that is.
And lobster. So before we jump into our last movie of the evening here, because I think we've talked all what we can about Lamb. What are you listening to these days? What kind of music you're putting on when you're doing your reviews for IGN and whatnot?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, I can't do that. I can't write and listen to music at the same time, and I don't understand the people who can. I get distracted. I have to concentrate. I need total silence.
Sure.
When I'm driving to and from work, I either listen to like spoken word stuff. I listen to like This American Life or a lot of different podcasts. And I also I'm a big record collector. So okay. I have this is really embarrassing, and also how old fashioned I am. I have in my car a little miniature wooden box that carries 40 CDs in it. So I have this, not even one of those wallets. I don't like those wallets because you have to take the CDs out, and it's too much of a hassle. So I just have less of a hassle and far less logical is a box. I just have a big wooden box on the front seat of my car. And I've been sort of working through this gigantic slew of compact discs that I've accumulated over the course of maybe the last year or so. And they're of all different kinds. A lot of them are compilations of like old rockabilly records.
Okay.
When I was traveling in Canada once for a set visit, I got to visit the set of it was not I think it was not Cult of Chucky, but the one right before it, Curse of Chucky. Curse of Chucky was being filmed in Canada, and it was all night shoots, so we were sort of left to our own devices during the day. I wandered into a thrift store, and I discovered this line of records, a record label called Righteous Records, and it put out Christian music. But I guess to pay the bills, they had also somehow gained access to every single record in Lux Interior and Poison Ivy's collection from the Cramps. And it was just, this is sort of like a subgenre unto itself, records that Lux Interior collected. Because Lux Interior had a very eclectic, weird, deep cut taste in really weird music. And yeah, you can buy like 2 CD sets. There's like 56 more of these tracks. Here's a song about a bear. Here's a song about being lost in a cave. Here's a song about sneezing. Just these really weird old rockabilly songs about these really bizarre topics. It wasn't until I got one of those that I realized that the Cramps Goo Goo Muck is a cover. And it's really funny going through the liner notes of these compilations because, all these like really weird 45s that they had in their garage were on these like little fly-by-night labels. And you'll read the liner notes and they'll say, we don't know anything about this label. Like it was formed just to record this one song and then it broke up. We think we don't know anything about this artist. We can't find his name anywhere. We don't know anything about the musicians who played on it, what studio musicians might have been on it, but Lux Interior had one. So we're going to put it on here. Like that's Lux Interior's collection, was he found every record there was only a single copy of and then based a band on it. That's friggin' cool. That's what I'm listening to these days.
Well, I'll tell you, you remind me of again back in the old days where my friends and I used to go to like independent record stores. That plus we would go to Tower Records, or we grew up in the malls of the '80s, so there was the Sam Goody, and always looking for like the most obscure thing we could find. And so while I appreciate Amazon Music's 70 million tracks that you can stream with our giveaway here that we're doing, a free 30-day trial of the Amazon Music Unlimited service. If you click the link in our description of this podcast at getamazonmusic.com/W2M network, I do miss the hunt and peck and the thrill of the hunt of going to the record store to find, oh my God, I found an old Ministry single that I'd never heard of before, things like that, or when people used to like on consignment bring in mixtapes that they had, like professionally made mixtapes that they made. I remember those from when I worked in record stores. All right, so back to where we started here at the top of the show. Pig, starring Nicolas Cage. And I just want to share this with you really quick. There's a debate going among all of my movie review friends, people I podcast with. They can't figure out if Nicolas Cage and Bruce Willis are just taking these movies now because they like to act. They are professional actors. This is their passion, and they'll just kind of and they're at a point in their careers now where they can just take any project that, you know, just to play, or they owe gobs and gobs of money in gambling debts. No, we can't decide.
Well, for Nicolas Cage, it might be the debts thing, because his debt was widely publicized. We know about the money he owes. Bruce Willis, I think he's just working. You know, this is how he pays bills. He needs to act. He is an actor. He needs to act. He's known for acting in action films. So sure, he's going to star in this little low budget action film. He's not above that. And I actually kind of respect the integrity, although making really crappy movies these days. Well, I'm trying to think what the last like Bruce Willis film I even saw was.
I know, like, there's a recent one called Cosmic Sin. There's another one's like Out of Law or something like that. Like, he's showing up in these movies I've never even heard of on streaming services, and they're all within the last year. I think him and Frank Grillo are in a competition.
I just called up his filmography, and in 2021 alone, he has 8 credits: Cosmic Sin, Out of Death,
right,
Midnight in the Switchgrass, Survive the Game, Apex, Deadlock, American Siege, and Fortress.
Yep.
I haven't heard of any of these. Have you? No, I heard of Cosmic Sin. That was the one I heard of. I didn't see it. The last movie I saw that had Bruce Willis in it was the Lego Movie 2.
We're gonna. I know what. I think Out of Death is the one we're gonna get to. That and another Nicolas Cage movie, Prisoners of Ghostland, sometime next month. So that's the reason why I know about them. But yeah, we keep seeing all these different. We did Jiu-Jitsu a couple of months last year, because I found out that it was actually an adaptation of the comic book, and I'm like, I gotta see what this is now. Occasionally I will do a show about a subject matter that drives one of my podcast friends nearly to the brink of saying, I don't want to do this with you anymore. Jiu-Jitsu was one of them.
Jiu-Jitsu. Right. Oh God, I don't even know Jiu-Jitsu.
It's one of the...
Bruce Willis, you go back to the earlier in his career back in the 80s, and he was a comedic guy. He was a comedian. Yeah. He was a romantic lead.
Moonlighting.
And exactly. Moonlighting was sort of what got him the job, and he was in hit comedy films like Look Who's Talking, and tried ambitious comedy projects like The Bonfire of the Vanities, which is awful, by the way. He was in Blind Date.
I love Blind Date. It's such a stupid movie.
It wasn't until he did, I think, The Last Boy Scout that he did an action film other than Die Hard. And it was only then that he really kind of started to emerge in the popular consciousness as an action star, because I grew up watching him in films like Death Becomes Her and Loaded Weapon, Pulp Fiction. These are, he was in a lot of varied kinds of movies. And at some point, just the cliche got larger than him as an actor. I think he's actually quite talented actor, but he kind of rested on his laurels and is now doing nothing but the action thing. And the same thing might be said of Nicolas Cage, but Nicolas Cage, unlike Bruce Willis, never had he was never pigeonholed. He never had like a certain type of role that he was known for. He always took really interesting, varied roles. And he's been in comedy films. He's been in horror movies. He's been in action pictures. He's been in horror movies. He
went through that one period in the 90s, in and around Bringing Out the Dead, where he was in a bunch of really like, it was like buckshot. The kinds of pictures he was in were all over the place.
Yeah. Great. I like that.
So do I. I like an actor that likes to play in different genres and is just likes to stretch. So
and just to bring us into Pig, like he really liked to stretch, but he eventually kind of got a reputation not as like a particular type of movie star, maybe. but he did get a reputation as being the guy who is crazy. Like he shouts a lot and bugs his eyes out, and he does take a lot of roles where he gets to sort of overact a lot, and that's a choice. That's not bad acting. That's not like what he's the only thing he's capable of. It's just he can play that kind of a role, and so he did. He can also play very mellow roles, like in Pig. Pig is not a kooky role.
No.
Pig, you compared it to John Wick. I would compare it more to another film he did called Mandy, which is a film I adore, which is also kind of a man in his comfort zone has to leave and pursue the people who took the love of his life. In Mandy, it was his wife. In this one, it's his pet. But the setup is similar. And Mandy is that's a crazy movie. That's wonderful. Like the bad guys are like this demonic cult that have been hiring these like cocaine sniffing, motorcycle riding demonic Cenobites from hell to facilitate the kidnapping of this woman. And she was kidnapped because this acid taking cult leader has taken far too much acid and his brain doesn't work anymore, and he's convinced he actually is the Messiah and has kidnapped her to be like one of his brides. And when she laughs at his dick, she essentially incurs. I'm sorry, can I cuss on the show? I should probably not have said that. Okay,
no, you're good.
She laughs at his genitals, and that sort of sparks him to evil things. And Nicolas Cage in that movie ends up having to go on this weird phantasmagoric odyssey where he like forges an axe and has to go after these Cenobites who are like doing coke, and it's amazing. It's like living in a heavy metal record cover. I love Mandy. Please see Mandy.
I will. That's on the list now. You went exactly where I wanted to go with this, because that is what everybody that I do movies review with just thinks of Nicolas Cage as kind of like a almost more modern Robin Williams from the 70s on coke, just eyes bugging out, going crazy, and screaming into the camera. And the thing about Pig, and we'll get into the plot real quick, is it's such a much more reserved performance. It was refreshingly reserved, especially for Nicolas Cage. It's a really simple premise. He's a retired chef that's living as a recluse in the forest of Oregon. He's got a truffle pig. That's how he makes his living, is he hunts truffles and he sells them to a wholesaler. And somebody steals his pig, and then he has to go kind of re-enter through this detour through underground fighting. He has to re-enter the culinary world in order to try to get back his pig. And along the way we meet the wholesaler's dad, who turns out he was married to this woman, and the last meal they had together where they were happy was actually cooked by Nicolas Cage, and he sort of uses all of that to try to get his pig back, which turns out in the act of stealing it was killed by these meth heads. And then the movie ends with Nicolas Cage playing a tape that was left to him by his ex-wife. And I love this movie. I love it for its simplicity. Like I said, somebody sold it to me as like John Wick. I remember like the Twitterscape was that was the whisper on it. And it's, obviously he's not punching people to death for 90 minutes like Keanu Reeves does. It's much more thoughtful than all of that. It's sort of a mystery. He's got to figure out, he's got to talk to people, try to figure out what happened to this darn pig. But it also, and this, I do enjoy a good cooking show. I love Jon Favreau's The Chef Show. I was really into that documentary series for a while.
Oh, well, I mean, that's what's replaced Law and Order as like the nation's comfort food. Is just when you're not eating, you're watching shows about eating. My wife and I more often than I care to admit have dozed off to a rerun of Chopped on the Food Network. Which is it's a cooking game show that somehow has lasted 50 seasons. It's amazing.
If we're not watching Family Guy to go to bed, we're watching Diners, Drives, and Drive-Ins, or however that goes.
Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives.
Yeah. But the point that I was getting to, and I want to get your feedback on this, is how much this is a love letter to like the culinary world, and sort of the high point of this film for me. It's my favorite scene in the movie, and I'll throw it over to you, is where they need to talk to this chef who now owns a modern restaurant, and they need to get information from him.
It's my favorite scene too. Yeah.
And he's loath to give it up. And it turns out he used to work for Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage sort of very calmly, very sharply lays into him about how he sold out and opened this shishi modern hoity-toity restaurant instead of opening the gastropub that he wanted to. Yeah. You know, and he ran away from his dream. And this guy's performance in this is so key, because he has, like, I don't know if you watch wrestling at all, but he has the Vince McMahon pulling his ear, his whole world is falling apart around him moment as he's trying to get through this conversation with Nicolas Cage. And he knows he's right, but he can't admit that. It's such a great scene. Yeah.
Well, I love that. That's my favorite scene in the movie as well. And I think I liked it because I kind of related to the character a little bit. I think this is something we can all relate to, where he's a very successful restaurateur. He is very proud of the upcoming truffle menu. He's proud of the wine he's serving. And he's also incredibly awkward and kind of dorky in that he's trying to laugh off the criticism that he knows is completely legit. And that's I think that's something we all do. If somebody says something really harsh to us, we don't recoil. We kind of, joking? Yeah. Yeah, we're joking. It's okay. I know it's legit, but we're joking. And so I love that performance from that actor. But I also, it reveals a lot about the characters in that one scene. It reveals that Nicolas Cage remembers a lot. And I know that a lot of people who have perfect recall tend to withdraw. It kind of affects their mind a lot. And he has perfect recall. And that explains an awful lot about him choosing the path that he did, leaving the restaurant business.
Right.
It reveals that the restaurant business is a lot like the mob, which is completely believable. It's not this weird fantasy that, isn't it funny that the restaurants are kind of like the mob? No, I would buy that they're run that way, that they're stealing chefs and like hiring meth addicts to steal like rival chefs' truffle pigs. Like that seems kind of realistic to me.
But hot culinary universe.
Yeah. And but yeah, that poor pathetic chef who is successful has revealed in that moment like that he wanted to open this pub, and that he still had in his mind the star dish that he was going to make. It was like it was like a liver egg of some kind. And I think we all have that moment where we realize we've chosen the path we've chosen for ease and success, because that's kind of where we want our lives to be. And we did have to cut something off. And it's not like we gave up on our dreams. It's just that we found the practical path. And here's Nicolas Cage, who is so passionate about food. He was willing to live in the woods with a pig by himself to complete, sort of living his dream, rather than compromise and open up this restaurant that he doesn't care about. Where's your passion, man? We understand that he's a deeply passionate person, that this other guy kind of gave up his passion. There's so much life in that one scene, in that one moment. I really, really loved it. And I liked the rest of Pig besides.
Yeah. I was thinking about, I think the other part of the movie that really stands out to me is when they're making the meal for Darius, Amir's father, I believe is his name, and how lovingly the camera shows them preparing the food. It's I've heard you guys talk about how sometimes there's the phrase out there like the male gaze, or the camera is leering, and here it's the camera is showing you how much love there is in making this food, how much effort goes into it. And it's a very nice series of shots, a very well shot scene, I think. And then his it's a great bit of acting on the character who plays Darius's part, where he's eating the food and then he remembers, and he kind of has this breakdown at the table. And then of course it ends in a fist fight. But it's a little unfortunate, but I'll allow it. And then the tragedy of it all is there was no saving the pig, because the pig was gone by this point. And I was like, that is really, really sad. And like I said, I'm watching this movie in contrast to it's like right smack in the big reset of the summer blockbuster season after COVID, and it was just nice to see like a reflective movie about a guy who who's again his relationship ended and he sort of latched onto this pig and this pig is gone and he just like, can I have this just one thing in the world? Can I be left alone with this one thing and be at peace? And no, the answer is you can't. Yeah. And what a tragedy. So much of what comes out of Hollywood has to be a crowd pleasing ending. It was kind of sadly refreshing, if I could use that oxymoron, to see a tragedy play out the way that it does. It's the best film of the three, I think. Pig.
Oh, definitely. The other two, I think, didn't really sort of think out what they were trying to do, as we've already talked about. And this one, is about something. It is about sort of the human condition and sort of what drives us to certain kinds of passions and how we elect to live, follow. That melancholy is carried everywhere on Nicolas Cage, and he's excuse me, he's coated in blood for a good portion of this movie. He gets in this big fist fight, and he never washes off, and that kind of bugs me, especially when he's in the kitchen later on preparing food for somebody else. Like, you'd never go into a kitchen covered in human blood. That's not sanitary. No chef would do that. They'd wash up first.
I suspect you don't watch a lot of combat sports.
Well, I mean, I don't doubt that he'd be coated in blood, but I doubt that he would be.
I was thinking I was
take
more
a shower eventually.
No, it's just like but I didn't know if it was just the walking to the kitchen in blood or just the fact that he was covered in blood. Only because like I have seen watching a lot of boxing and MMA, just these guys just covered in blood, and they're like, man, let's go, let's keep fighting. So I was amused by that whole fight scene, but to be honest with you, I thought it was better than what they did in Bruised.
I didn't see Bruised, but yeah.
All right. I think unless there's anything else you want to talk about, Peg, I think we have just about reached the conclusion here.
No, I do encourage everybody to see it though. Of these three, this is the one that's not just getting the most acclaim. It's worth the most acclaim. It's worth your attention the most. Well, I don't want to say worth your attention, but it is one that you would do good to see. Just because of the great performances, the expert directing, like the handling of the emotional material. I feel like Lamb is a marriage drama with a supernatural element that doesn't contribute to the marriage drama, and right. Wolf is a movie about outsiders, I think, but the actual symbols and the actual symbology and the actual meaning of the movie remains frustratingly opaque. I just want to have like a really rich meal with truffles in it. and that's a good sign of a movie makes you want to have a certain meal. Then I think that's a good one.
Well, then I'm sure at one point or another in your life you saw Harold and Kumar go to White Castle, and which essentially was a 90-minute commercial for that restaurant. Which then when my friends and I were done watching the movie, we actually did go to White Castle. Like, this was a bad idea, but yes, I get what you're saying. Whitney, it was great having you on the show. I really enjoyed talking this. I hope you'll come back at some point.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great, and this was the interesting Hoofcore trilogies that we can the 2021 Hoofcore trilogy will go down in infamy as one of the most important cinematic movements of all time. So I'm glad I was here to kick the doors open and let the world know.
Sure, people should take a minute, maybe not see, maybe take a break from seeing Ghostbusters and Eternals and whatever the next crazy Marvel thing is, and what, for God's sakes, watch a nice little indie flick. Go see Licorice Pizza. That's actually next on my list. I watched before tonight. My wife and I watched Spencer. Speaking of weirdo flicks, see this all we are lousy with options with PVOD and streaming out there. There's all these really good movies to see. So take a break is all I'm saying. And Whitney, it was really great to have you. Go ahead and do your plugs where they can find you.
where can't they find me? I run a podcasting network with one William Bibiani. We do a podcast or two every day. It's called the Critically Acclaimed Network. We have a regular show where we review new films called Critically Acclaimed, but we do many other shows besides. Whenever we get around to it, we do a show called Canceled Too Soon about canceled television shows.
That's the one I found, you guys. And through Podcoin, when for 5 minutes when Podcoin was a thing, that's the show that was the show I found was Canceled Too Soon. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And if you subscribe to our Patreon, you get even more shows. We do shows about Batman. We do shows about Star Trek. So we delve into the pop culture stuff as well. We're not just hoity-toity jerks about love and art movies. We just love art movies. I also occasionally appear on a monthly podcast now called All About Ovid with 1B Peterson. We talk about the streaming service Ovid, which is where a lot of deep cut art house stuff goes. It's a lot of recent releases, a lot of things from the last decade or so that maybe got a week-long release in like New York or Los Angeles. You can find all of those films on Ovid, and there's a lot of really interesting work on there. B and I get together every month, and we talk about whatever we saw that month on Ovid. What else am I doing? You can find me on the social media. I'm on, at Witney Seibold. I am currently editing a radio drama. So if you're following me on the social media, I'll say when it's ready, and then you can Venmo me a couple bucks and I'll send you a copy. A 30-minute radio drama. It'll be a Christmas show just in time for Christmas.
Very good. Your Canceled Too Soon show on Quibi inspired me to next month. My friends and I are going to review Dummy, because the idea of Anna Kendrick palling around with a sex doll was fantastic to me. So I can't wait to review that.
Yeah, Dummy was one of the better things that I got to see on Quibi. Long may it rain, and peacefully may it rest. I recently got a gig. Oh, this is something I should probably hype. I started writing for Slash Film recently, so you can find my work. I actually am in print again, so you can find my work over on Slash Film. And one of the articles I got to write was on Quibi, so because of course. And go over to Slash Film, read my article on Quibi. That was really great.
All right, folks. Please go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We are trying to get on Rotten Tomatoes. That's our big goal. So if we get enough people subscribing on YouTube, we will finally meet the criteria for that. That's what I've been pushing lately. Or leave us a review on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. As far as other movies we're reviewing, speaking of triple features, myself and Jason Teasley reviewed King Richard, The Guilty, and Night Teeth earlier this week. Next week, myself and Alexis Haina are reviewing West Side Story, among other things. And the week after that, we've got Nightmare Alley and the new Spider-Man movie. So go ahead and check us out there. Once again, Whitney, thank you for coming on. I'm Mark Radulich. He's Witney Seibold. This is Triple Feature. Be well, be safe, and behave.